All right, so Ian and I just got the results back from the, what's it called? The pre-Q3 design iteration survey results. And we thought it would be helpful to record our conversation, kind of going through the survey and talking through how we can apply some of the feedback to our regular process. Okay, so the first question is, how often does your product designer break design problems into smaller issues that can be incrementally delivered over time? I think we do this every milestone. I think the evidence that I would see to do this is we have these redesign epics. Should I share my, I can even share my screen. Um, you can see my screen, right?
Okay.
And so, you know, this as an example, we did have one of these for the container registry, and this is the one for the package registry. And what I've seen you do that's really helpful is you create all of these issues at once um, with the designs included, and then you review these with Nico, who's our front end engineer, and we add weights to them, we prioritize them based on the weights and if they're blocked by anything. So I feel like this is a very iterative approach that we've been able to do. Um, I feel like I'm very satisfied on that front. I think we're doing a good job with that. The second, is there another question? No, then there's a bunch. Oh, how would you rate your? Okay, that's, I just got into that. So then a lot of people in the like what can be improved talk about things like partnering with engineering, being more involved in strategy discussions, and being willing to like talk through some of the maybe UX, that's not design interactions. Um, so in the first, on the am I talking too much?
Okay,
Okay,
this is all
okay.
good.
On the first part, on the partnering with engineering, I think we learned maybe in 13.3, we had our first design technical investigation issue at the same time. I'll share my screen again. And the valuable thing about this was you had the chance to work with David on figuring out what is the user flow, what are all the different interactions, how does the design meet the technical investigation. And I thought that that was a really good learning for us because I think now we try to apply that moving forward. And one success point that I would share is seeing the engineers also want that same interaction. So like David saying, we should do an investigation and design because it's really valuable for him to be able to talk to you through the interactions. And I think you've mentioned maybe that you kind of were able to like shed some light on his technical investigation too, like stressing some of the different interactions. So I thought that that was a really good proof point for that, like design interacting with engineers, and something we like to stick to. Um, on the strategy front, I feel like we do regular discussions about, like, one thing that I've noticed that's helpful is trying to have the milestone plan up a week early. That was a shift maybe we made like 6 months ago. Instead of having to try to have the issues done on the 4th, we try to have them done on the 26th, which gives you and I time to go through the plan for the milestone. Um, I noticed that another thing that you've done is like create your milestone plan that feeds into the team's milestone plan. It also gives us another interaction point to like measure what, like discuss strategy and bubble up what design work is going on. So I think that that's really useful. And then I think those are the major takeaways that I had. I feel like we're doing a lot of those things. I'm sure there's room for some other things that we improved. That was a big change for me, is this like slipping baseline of how we plan design issues. And we kind of corrected that maybe 3 milestones ago, where it felt like we had a really productive few months of design. Like we redesigned the container registry, the package registry, we have the dependency proxy, and I think I started just like putting in last minute issues into the milestone. And we had this discussion about, no, it's good to have time to design before we start implementing, because it's going to make us both be aligned on strategy and interactions, and then it's going to result in better defined issues. So I think that was the other big iteration that we've had towards addressing these things. So Um, I'm feeling pretty good about how we're tackling that stuff.
Nice. I think you hit on a lot of points that I was going to bring up, which is great. One thing that I have noticed is that when the UI is the focus, we have a really strong pattern, just like you discussed, of how to break it down, where I create the design, I partner with engineering, and we break apart the design into its smallest pieces and work from there. One of the areas that I'd like to see us improve on, and the dependency proxy, as we discussed, is kind of an example of this, where the backend is more the focus, being able to better be part of the conversation of how, when we're breaking it down, sometimes it felt like we were just breaking down one 6-month process into milestones instead of taking a user-centered approach and being able to say, okay, first milestone, let's deliver caching in the request forwarding, and really kind of focusing on, instead of breaking up a large initiative just into small pieces and having to wait until the end to get results for our users, being able to break them down. So that conversation was a little bit harder than some of our others. So I wonder if that's an area that we could improve on.
I think so. Yeah, I think I noticed that same thing in that project, because it was one of those things that it was hard to attack iteratively, because we're looking at the end, we're hearing what our customers are telling us that they want this functionality. And I at least wasn't imagining the skateboard into the moped, into the car. Um, I think we eventually ended up iterating on it, and we talked about it at our Think Big, and then we had another brainstorming session. And I think we have a plan now, but I'm wondering how we could have, what we could have done is realize that sooner, that it was going in that direction, and that maybe the conversations were too big, and we were operating in this waterfall method. Um, what do you think were
It
like
could be
a leading indicator of that's happening, you think?
yeah, I think the warning flag went up for me when we were talking at the Think Big and the engineers were talking about how an entire milestone was going to be dedicated to just the models. And in my mind, because I don't know anything about models, because that's just not my purview, like that means we're not delivering value. And so it's not an MVC, it's just a step. I wonder if we can be a little more, pay a little closer attention to when we start seeing those as flags, when we're just delivering code, not delivering value. And that can kind of help us reshift our focus. Like, first we need, like, if you needed to deliver value in the next milestone towards that, how would we do it? And maybe identify that earlier. We got there, just like you had addressed, but I'm kind of saying we could get there earlier. Maybe something that
Yeah.
we could work on.
Yeah,
Does that
I
make sense?
think,
Does that resonate
yeah,
with you?
it totally does. I'm thinking of like, okay, what principles do we have in place that would have guided us there? And like, one would be like anything that's over a certain weight, we try to break down.
Mm.
Maybe there's something else there that's like, sometimes we may need to deliver things that may not necessarily deliver user value, but that they could still be useful. But when we're in that mode, that should be a flag for both of us to say, like, we're not delivering value, and we may not deliver value the next mile. This may take 3 milestones. Okay, well then we got to think about the skateboard. We got to think about what we could do first as an MVC, and that could be the warning that prompts us, instead of it being, what happened was we talked through like how we were going to build it. We took a day or two, and then we came up with a more iterative approach. I'm trying to think how that could turn into a handbook update.
Yes. I wonder if that's actually, you summed it up quite nicely, where we identify it as a flag during planning. I'm not sure where this would fit in the handbook particularly, but something to say is, if we are delivering something in a milestone that doesn't actually directly give value to our users that would be using the feature, that it's a flag we should talk about. Doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong or not what we should be doing. Sometimes that happens, but recognizing that we should talk about it and make sure that we all understand and agree to what that means, and there isn't really a good alternative. Wonder if that's something we could identify.
I think it's a good place to start, and it's, just adding that to our how we work section of like, when we see this, it's a flag, and people should call it out. It could be you or me, or it could be anyone on the team, really.
That's true.
And then we could iterate from there. Like, once we see, like, is this working, or if it didn't catch something, why didn't it? And then we can improve it from there.
I like that.
I could add that to our handbook.
Perfect.
Okay.
Otherwise, I agree with a lot of what you were saying. I think we have a pretty sound iterative approach in a lot of the ways we implement large scale designs. It's documented pretty well. This is just one area that we could improve on.
I think the other area now that I'm being critical is I think we can improve on how we work across teams. I noticed there's room for improvement on, and this came up in our retro of we had a few issues that we were dependent on another team for, and I didn't do a good job of creating that visibility earlier on. So that's another thing that I think we can add to the handbook about how we work cross-functionally. What I've done to address it for now is I've updated the milestone planning issue to include a section for cross-functional work, just to create visibility for it. And then also I am meeting with the PMs of those stages or whoever's in charge of that stage earlier on to give them at least a milestone heads up so we can plan it appropriately.
That's awesome. I know we couldn't really do that for the feature you're describing, but also being able to chime in or bring in the designers. We have a voice in the strategy and prioritization, stuff like that. So if we're aware of cross-functional things earlier, we can also help guide and talk to our PMs about making things priorities. So that would be something I would suggest as well. Granted, the example you're using didn't have one of those because this was a database interaction, not
But
a UX thing, but
we have another example coming up, though, possibly where we'll need to work with the secure and defend teams on the dependency firewall. And so I think keep getting the PM and the designer included in the process earlier so we get better discussion will be really valuable. And as much lead time as possible is good because everybody's busy and we all have our own things going on.
For sure.
Okay. Anything else we should add to that?
No, I think we're doing a really good job in general with iteration. I know some other teams have been struggling in areas that we've been succeeding. So I just want to make sure we know we're doing good.
Cool. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I'm going to stop the recording, but thanks, Iain.